Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Ginny Worley-Hemmeter. Today we're under a literary tornado watch as we discuss Chasing Helicity with Chief Meteorologist at ABC, Ginger Zee. Take appropriate shelter and join us. Welcome, Ginger. Thank you for joining us on Authors Revealed. What inspired you to write for kids?
I have been wanting to do this for a long time. So one of my favorite things to do when I was in any local news station was to go into the community and talk to kids about science. It's where I got to get my passion out. It's where I got the most excited. And it's where I get to talk for as long as I want about science and communicate my favorite thing about the atmosphere. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to put a bunch of science in a book, but you can't just always do it, straight science, or else you've just written a textbook.
Right.
So a way to do that is to tell it through a story and through a character. And that character is one that I've had in my head for at least a decade, and her name is Helicity.
Yes, and she's awesome.
Yeah.
I love her. She's such great range of emotion. When you were talking to kids at school, do you see a lot of kids that are interested in weather?
It's funny because there's always at least one that I can tell is really into it, but that was always me. It's like that 1 out of 500 or something. You felt like you were in a weird place. And that's why I wanted Helicity to be a lot more than just weather. I want it to be science in general. I want it to be adventure. And then I also wanted it to be life lessons. And that's how I've learned all of my life lessons, is through storms. I mean, we all have our personal storms and we have the real storms, and they often mirror each other. And how people react to those storms and the lessons that they take away, that's what I think they're all meant for. And
Absolutely.
So this is a concentrated version of what I've gone through in my life that this poor 13, 14-year-old is enduring, and it's coming to find her instead of her finding it like
Right.
I did.
So how much of it is autobiographical or inspired by your own experiences?
So much of it is autobiographical. I say semi because obviously not everything is just like me, but I have a brother who was injured who played football. I have definite characters that were based on my life. Where they go and where the story goes is definitely different than how I played out my life, and that's intentional. I want it to be the growth that I've had in 30 years sucked down into her couple of years, so that everybody reading it and the kids hopefully that are growing up with her as they read the second and third book can say, okay, I got some perspective. Whatever I'm worried about right now doesn't matter. There is such a bigger world out there, and there's so much more life and so many more things that I can learn. So my A- when I wanted an A
Right.
isn't going to end my day.
Well, gosh, with the tornado that starts just in that first chapter,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, she gets all her experience relative to that right away.
Right away. And
Yeah.
that's what I want kids to know, is that that's how quickly things can happen, good and bad in life. Tomorrow can be a very different day. I always think of the good that can happen tomorrow, because I think that in my own life, in my personal life, I struggled for so long. My career was up. And then my personal life often was not that way. And so if you would have told me 5 years ago that I was going to have a husband and 2 babies, I would have laughed in your face. But that's the beauty of what can happen
Right.
tomorrow. And I wish that I could have felt that hope a lot of times that comes from storms.
Right. Now, there's a lot at the end of the book that's unanswered.
Yes.
So there's definitely a sequel in the works.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
this
good.
is a trilogy. It's already a trilogy.
Okay.
So second one's done, just finished it up, and it comes out a year from now.
Oh, wonderful.
And believe me, the storms get bigger and Helicity gets braver.
Will you see some of those clouds starting to build at the end
Yes,
of
you
two, to use the weather metaphor?
Yeah.
I'm specifically interested in Andy. I mean, he's got a lot ahead of him that you've laid a couple pieces for. I'm really interested to see where that goes.
And so applicable to life. I mean, I
Right.
think this is something that, not perhaps when you're 8 to 12, but someone in your life surrounding you, you may have seen one of these issues. Doesn't matter which type of substance, but something that
Right.
affects the person that you love. And that's what I think we're setting up in Andy, and it's so applicable to what is happening in
Absolutely.
thousands and thousands of our lives.
Absolutely. Well, I
Hundreds of
like
thousands.
the hope that Helicity is involved in that she sees it, and her beloved older brother,
Yep.
and her impact and all of that. I'm excited to see where that goes. But I also love that Helicity's name is in honor of her grandmother.
Yes.
So is that character of her grandmother, Doris, is it Picosi?
Picosi.
Is that someone that's in real life to you? Where did that come from?
Picosi is my mother's maiden name.
Okay.
And so that's a family name. Doris is just a woman that I grew up with that was mother-like. And then aside from that character, none of them were physicists, but I wanted that strong woman who's a scientist as someone she looked up to.
Right.
And my mom was that for me. She's a neonatal nurse practitioner, and while she's in the biology side of things, science was always pushed and really championed in my family. And so I wanted that to see the familial line of that for a young man or woman reading this book saying, oh, yeah, women do have that position. I just want that to be there. It doesn't have to be talked about. It doesn't have to be, I just want it to be a part of Helicity's life.
Absolutely.
So it's not even a thought. And that's how it should be in all of our lives.
Right. Well, again, just like the struggle that Andy is having, it's just part of the story, and it's sort of relatable, and it should just be something that's there that it doesn't have to be a focus of it. But I just love that story that, again, right in the beginning, she talks about it.
Yeah. And that's I mean, the word helicity is my favorite variable in tornado science, and that's where it comes from. So when I go to study tornadoes, actually tomorrow and Wednesday, going to be a potential outbreak, I've been looking at 0 to 3 kilometer helicity. That's the variable that I look at in our troposphere to determine whether the atmosphere will have enough spin to make a tornado. And so that, I don't know why, I've always thought that word was pretty and kind of a name, and I actually was thinking for a long time, it could be my daughter's name someday. And then my husband was like, no, but then we had 2 boys anyway.
Right. So then you wrote a book, so you were like, forget that.
Yep, this is my baby.
Exactly. Yeah. Right, your literary baby. I love it. Tell us a little bit more about your writing process.
So I went not thinking that I was a writer at all. I just thought that I had a good idea and maybe a good platform to help inspire kids, and that's what I've always done the whole way up. So my intention was to write a baby book. I went to the publisher saying, I think I could write 60 words and we could put some really cool pictures to it and we could teach kids about science. And they said, no, this character you're talking about is much more for a middle grade. And I've had a lot of learning to learn that voice of so I've had writing and editing help from the publisher side in that first book especially, and you'll see in the second book I think so much more of me because I started to learn that voice myself, and from the impetus from the beginning of everything it's like full of me. And so now I'm starting to feel much more confident, and I'm hoping that I'll have to have very little of anything for the third and final one, because it's just like Helicity, I'm growing through something that maybe I wasn't great at. She's told at the beginning, you're not so great at science and math, but she knows she needs that for that thing she wants at the end. I want that lesson out there. I was always good at science and math. They came so easily to me. I never had to have help. People told me all the time, but writing is something I had to grow into. With my memoir, all the words are mine, and they liked it. And people liked it, and they bought it, and it went on the New York Times bestseller list.
Right.
And I wrote that, and it was so exciting. So the process right now for me for the next one will start on airplanes, because that's when I have the most focused time, when I'm traveling. And when I write notes first, and I try to write some sort of arc of story.
Okay.
Throughout news writing, I've learned how to tell a story in 90 seconds. This is expanding that.
Yes.
I am having so much fun now at this point within the second book. I was developing too many characters, where I had to just rein it in.
A little overexcited, yeah.
And that's what's nice about having such great editors, is they say, hold on, let's do more here and less there. And that's really the biggest process for me, is kind of that compromise of knowing they know best what works for that age group. And that's where I'm taking their advice and saying, oh, okay, all right, I put it all out there.
Yeah.
Also, mine is very dark often, so they have to hope it up a little bit.
Right. This is a middle grade series.
Yes.
There's not so much death and destruction.
Whoa.
Yes, take it back
But
in.
that's how the world works.
Right. Yes, it just has to be presented.
No, they're so good at helping.
Oh, awesome. That's great to hear. What has surprised you most about the publishing process, first of all?
Gosh. I think I'm just impressed by how much people still love books. I think I always liked reading, and I was always a reader, especially when I was young. And then my types of reading that I did growing up and then as an adult changed significantly. And I got so much more into news that I ended up, that was more the type of, and then Physics Today and the trades that I read for meteorology. So it's either super sciencey reading, or I never really got into fiction, and that's why this is so fun. It's fun to watch the development of it. It's fun to think, and when you were asking writing process, I should have told you this too. I write 2 pages of every chapter, so that's like a synopsis, so that I have the idea.
It's your 90 seconds.
It's my 90 seconds, and then I go back, and there I have the arc and the story, and then I can fill in with the details and make it feel textured and like it actually has story to it, and that's where I go too far sometimes.
What about being on book tours? Anything been surprising to you with that? I know you've done a lot of work with kids in schools before, but
kids in schools, it's funny because I've done them for so long, and now it's been almost 20 years of being in schools with kids. I just realized that my first school talk was 19 years ago.
Wow.
And that was with, one of my internships, watching someone do it and then becoming a part of it. And it's where it inspired me to do what he did. And I thought if I'm in television, I get to do that, because I could have gone into any part of meteorology, but the communication of science is the part that I loved the most. So that part feels like the common thread has never ended. I mean, that part, every school is very similar that way, and you have a lot of the same kids. And I always see poor me as a kid, and she's right in the front, or he's right in the front, like, and so they all have kind of, but I love that part of it. The other, I guess what's surprising me with this is the amount of adults that are reading it. I didn't realize how many adults like to read younger kids' books.
Yeah. It's called the crossover audience. I'm sure your publisher will
see,
tell
and
you
I
all
had
about
no
it.
idea.
Yes. You talked about reading as a child. What's the first book you can remember hearing or
Charlotte's
reading?
Web.
Charlotte's Web.
Yep, Charlotte's Web. And not only do I remember it, really remember how much I enjoyed the story, but it was read to us in whatever grade it was. That I don't remember. But I remember we got to have snack with it. And so if I ever see Charlotte's Web, a cover, when I see the art of it on a movie or whatever, I immediately want a string cheese and apple. So I have a connection.
That's Hatchet. I read Hatchet in 5th grade. It's not the first one I remember, but our teacher read it while eating an apple, and it was a little bit traumatic at times, but and the book's a little traumatic at times. So right, it's a little different, but that's funny how those connections stick in your brain. Let's talk about a little bit more on your job then. What's some of the most memorable weather that you've ever covered? You must have a million
so many
stories.
storms,
Yes.
but Katrina will always be, I hope it's never topped. I mean, I hope for so many reasons that it's never topped meteorologically, but mostly humanly. And that was, for me, my first big storm. And so I, in my career, have never felt the way that I felt when I left that storm. It was boot camp for me in the way of learning how to tell a story, because I really hadn't ever been in something like that. Nobody has. We were stuck there just like everybody else. We didn't have food. We didn't have a ton of water. We had to ration that. We slept in the van, and we stayed for 7 days. And by the end of that 7 days, I was so dehydrated. I was so in this place of true... it takes extreme camping to I was so dirty. We hadn't showered, we hadn't whatever. And then my boss said, we're going to switch you out. You need a break. I mean, I was exhausted. And as I was driving away, I was realizing I get to go home. And then I just started bawling. And I couldn't handle the guilt of leaving these people who had lost everything, and they weren't going to have it tomorrow, and they weren't going to have it in a year, and they still don't have it today. That's how long it took to get help there, and how long it's taken for those people to rebuild their lives. And I felt that, and it felt so heavy. So that one will always stick with me, not just for how high the storm surge was, because that was impressive in itself, but for how impactful it was to everybody there.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't think about that impact as a meteorologist on TV, the emotion that you're feeling because you're reporting on it, but there's still people hurting.
I write so much in my book was the first big storm, and I took those experiences and I applied them to every wildfire and every flash flood, because it doesn't, and it's all relative. Just because Katrina was on a national scale so much larger, in someone's life, the flash flood in Boulder, Colorado that I covered that killed 4 kids, and I'll never forget those families and those people, that's just as impactful for that smaller group of people. And so disaster, and that's the other thing that I've learned, because I'm usually there when it's happening, because I've storm chased it. That's how I forecast well enough to be there. It's a really weird experience to be in a unique position to be that first person that they talk to and to watch. And the human condition is the same, no matter if it's a wildfire, a hurricane, a tornado. All those disasters bring out the exact same thing in every single person. The first part's shock, then they go through different levels of sadness, anger, frustration, guilt, survivor's guilt. And you watch this in a small 3-4 day period of time, and you become almost, I don't want to say expert, because I'm not an expert, but you know what to expect, and you know the tenderness that it takes. And Katrina got me to that place a lot faster.
Right. So speaking of Katrina, how have you seen the impact of climate change in the U.S. in your career?
In my career, I think the biggest issue, and we saw it play out this year, is our sustainability efforts and the lack thereof. And I think that no matter how much and we used to study this at Valparaiso, boundary layer meteorology, like if you put a paved parking lot where soybeans used to be, you have changed not just the permeability of the land, but you have changed the heat. And so on a small scale, there have been studies done where obviously tornadoes enjoy heat and surfaces that are flat. So if you've taken away the friction of trees, grasses, and whatever else was there, and you've put flat, hot pavement, you inevitably have changed it. So now do that on a much larger scale of how we've changed our Earth. And I think that is the biggest change that I've seen. Now in Harvey, for example, this year, you take a place like Houston, where their permits that they were allowed to give out for construction led the United States in the number of permits in building for 4 years in a row or something. They just build a lot. We were just there, and they had a whole new complex, and the building is nonstop. So you've changed your entire surface of an area that is on the Gulf of Mexico, that was at one point permeable and swampland, and then you've put a hard base. And so you've created, I always say this too, when people say, oh, the road turned into a river. Well, that's because we made it that way. A road is a river. It's the base of a river. It's given water a flat place to flow into. So when I do my show Food Forecast, I was doing grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And there are these it's such an interesting story, because I met these ultra-conservative politically Texans that were giving what I would call a soil sermon, and they're all going back to the natural state of what our earth was in, because that ends up saving their cattle, saving them money, and they found this beautiful, biodynamic way of farming. No more monoculture, and no more, because when you do a monoculture, you're doing the same thing as laying pavement down. You're stripping the soil of everything that's there, and you're creating a flat base of a river. And so when water falls, and it falls so fast, and say climate change makes it even a little bit faster, I think it's really the base that we've made that's going to change it more for our human condition.
Right. Amazing. That's really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part of your job as a meteorologist?
Oh my gosh. I love still just figuring out the puzzle that is the atmosphere. I mean, that's never going to go away. That part is fascinating. From when I look over your shoulder and I look and I say, that cirrus cloud, and I think about, what did I look at this morning in the computer modeling, and where is that coming from, and what direction am I facing, and where, all of those things. That's still my favorite part. When this all ends and nobody wants me on TV and nobody wants me to talk about it anymore, I'm still going to do that.
Right, yes. Well, it's your passion.
Yeah, and so that part it's my hobby. It would become a hobby. It would become, and a lot of people love the weather. And I think what's interesting is, as people age, I see this in adults. And I'm doing it more in nature, where I'm like, I suddenly want to bird watch. I'm like, where did that come from? I thought only older people. Oh my God, I'm the older people. They start to pay more attention and they care more. And that's the other part of Helicity that I wanted to inspire, was the respect and the awe of what's around us. And so that part's important to me, because I have seen the worst. And so now to know what the worst can do to people and to our environment and to our things, that's important for kids to learn.
Yeah. Well, I think back to the scene in the book where she goes into Lana's office and sees all the pictures that she has on that board.
Yes.
Does that board exist somewhere?
I'm
really excited to see those pictures.
Yeah, I have a lot of those pictures. I have a lot of those pictures in my presentation actually tonight.
Well, Ginger, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Chasing Helicity is for any middle grade reader in your life, especially those who love adventure or who are budding storm chasers. Thanks for joining us on Authors Revealed.